You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYBC.
WCYTV.
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WYBC. If you were hoping, as I was kind of hoping, for an end of the week bit of relaxation in which, there was a smidgen of news. Sure, there's, a little bit going on, but it isn't too terrible after all. Maybe we're just going to rehash the same kinds of news cycles that the whole week's been going on. You have Fridays like that. This ain't one of them. Because right out of the gate here, this afternoon, you had a federal judge by the name of Michael Farbiarz. I know I'm not pronouncing that correctly. Farbiarz, whatever. He's from New Jersey. District Court judge, and he ordered the pro-Hamas activist Mahmoud Khalil to be released from federal custody. So at about 2 p.m. this afternoon, Politico and several other articles announced that this Mahmoud Khalil guy, one of the architects of the Columbia University encampments, in which the definitely just pro-Palestine people flew actual flags of Hamas, now they're flying flags for Iran's regime, and broke stuff, stole stuff, assaulted people, vandalized Columbia University, terrorized students, broke in and tried occupying the library, just a whole lot of really awful stuff, as that crew is wont to do. And Mahmoud Khalil is one of the architects, one of the leaders of that group. He's called for really gross stuff. And it turns out that the United States does not have to give a green card to someone who comes in here and calls for violence. That's not something we have to do. But even after an immigration judge, James E. Comins from Louisiana, the assistant chief immigration judge actually for that region of the country, ruled on April 11th that Khalil was deportable based on Secretary of State Marco Rubio's assertion that his presence posed adverse foreign policy consequences, which in fact is true. If you have an immigrant who comes to the United States, they are not a citizen. They are just here at our good pleasure. And we believe that their causing trouble here would in fact be against the foreign policy wishes of the United States. The U.S. does not have to keep them here. Propose for just a minute here, just for a moment, that we have someone from China come into the United States and they start preaching that communism is great and that the people of the United States needs to rise up violently and to overthrow the system to bring about communist revolution just like China, and trying to whip up American students to saying China needs to take Taiwan now because it's China. Well, the State Department would not and should not keep that person around. That is, in fact, a very negative thing to have in the country, and citizens do have the right to say that. If you want to be a citizen, you want to be retarded and say really stupid things, that is your legal right. But if you're not a citizen, you don't wield sovereign franchise. And so it is not the United States' responsibility to bring you here and enjoy the society that we have set up so you can spout anti-American crap. And from my foreign policy position, which is more kind of Teddy Rooseveltian, anything that I don't care to hear immigrants that are not citizens say in the United States. It's not a free speech issue because immigrants are not subject to the amendments of the Constitution built for citizens of the United States. So, that all said, we now go to today, where there is this weird order delivered from New Jersey District Court Judge Michael Farbiarz, Care Bear, who has announced that Mahmoud Khalil will have his green card returned to him. And the U.S. government obviously continues to object to this because he's subject to a pending order of removal, and has also announced the U.S. government is not allowed to track where this guy is going, which is kind of wild in and of itself. Number two, the government must provide Khalil a certified copy of his passport, withholding his real one that restricts his ability to travel internationally. His domestic travel is limited to New York and Michigan. Islamic activists in Michigan. What's that? Oh yeah, Dearborn. Again, Washington, D.C. for legislative lobby, because of course, if there's one thing we want, it's Hamas activists being able to lobby. And then New Jersey and Los Angeles, in case he wants to view human filth. So Judge Farbiarz, the New Jersey district judge, quote, believes this is a real concern and that there should be at least some measure of control over this. And then he must report an updated address to Homeland Security within 48 hours of arriving to New York. Now, first of all, it should be made perfectly clear this is a stupid decision. If there is an individual in the country that is causing trouble, Khalil was here causing trouble. As an immigrant, not as a citizen, there are some kinds of trouble that you and I as citizens of the United States are, allowed to cause within our rights of the Constitution. Now, if you are listening to the show and you are visiting, you have some kind of a visa, then no, you do not have those same rights that I as a citizen of the United States enjoy. It's just the way that is. If you'd like to become a citizen, we have this really cool legal process for you to go to become a citizen. And if you are listening to this show and you're illegal, self-deport. So, that all said, the Homeland Security Office, in fact, decided now is finally the time to tell the district court judge no. So we've all been waiting on our toes for quite a while to see if at some point the Trump administration was going to look at one of these federal judges overstepping their bounds outside of the jurisdiction that they have, which we'll get to why that matters here in a second, and essentially saying, how about no? You don't just get to govern by fiat as a judge in the United States. You don't just get to walk out in the morning and go as a district judge out of Connecticut, God forbid, and say, I declare that I am king. No, not allowed. Many apologies to you. From the Homeland Security social media accounts as a public statement this afternoon, 4:36 p.m., quote, an immigration judge, not a district judge, has the authority to decide if Mr. Khalil should be released or detained. On the same day, an immigration judge denied Khalil bond and ordered him removed. One rogue district judge ordered him released. This is yet another example of how out-of-control members of the judicial branch are undermining national security. This conduct not only denies the results of the 2024 election, it also does great harm to our constitutional system by undermining public confidence in the courts. That last clause is especially true. Now, this last sentence smacks of Marco Rubio, and we'll get there. It says that it's a privilege to be granted a visa or a green card to live and study in the United States of America. The Trump administration acted well within its statutory and constitutional authority to detain Khalil, as it does with any alien who advocates for violence, glorifies and supports terrorists, harasses Jews, and damages property. Harasses anyone, by the way. An immigration judge has already vindicated this position, and we expect a higher court to do the same. Now, already we have the armchair lawyers that are swooping in on social media to say this is a really terrible thing, and the Trump administration is flouting federal judge authority. Here's the thing. They're not even in the same chain of command. They're not. In fact, for a federal district court judge, if you want to appeal that decision, it goes to that circuit's Court of Appeals. And then there's a panel of judges who rules that, for example, Donald Trump does in fact maintain control of the National Guard and Gavin Newsom can go pound sand and cry. That's what the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals did. When an immigration judge makes a decision that you do not like, it does not go to a federal district court judge, especially not from Louisiana up into New Jersey. I'm afraid not. It goes to the Board of Immigration Appeals, the BIA. From the Board of Immigration Appeals, that crew then decides whether or not the immigration chief's decision stands. Now, we don't know at this point whether the Homeland Security Department actually has decided to release him temporarily or not, and which parts of that order they are directly going to follow. Because again, it's not an order that's even germane to this particular situation. It just isn't. And so far, the comments that we've actually reached out right before the show, asking if, in fact, this individual would be given, the time of day, or if they would essentially just tell him to, go pound sand as well, and they would keep Khalil in custody. We don't have an answer on that yet. But from these social media posts, it seems explicitly clear that the gravy train for just letting federal district court judges do whatever they want and following them around, even if they are not related to the case at all, that those days are over. Now, the Department of Homeland Security isn't screwing around in a number of ways, and we're going to get into that. Radio crew, we got to send you over to commercial. We'll catch you in a second. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Okay, so first of all, let's talk just very, very, very briefly about how the Secretary of Homeland Security is not screwing around. Kristi Noem ain't here to play. She is not.
One thing I will tell you is that the former Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, was a train wreck. He was a train wreck, and he was hard to work for. I worked with him previously and in trying to build relationships with Canada so that we knew who was crossing our border, asking them to take back their citizens that were illegal here in this country. He was very hard to work with. He talked to President Trump about setting up a fentanyl czar so we could deal with the drug issue, but wasn't willing to share criminal background information on individuals with us.
That's wild, by the way. That is wild that the Canadian government basically wanted to allow unfettered immigration and travel between the Canadian provinces and the United States, but refused to share certain kinds of criminal background information and prior arrest records of those coming into the United States. So, for example, if you have someone who is emigrating or, just traveling for a couple of days from Canada into the U.S., that, they're coming in from Vancouver, from the Couve, into the country, and they may have, a prior arrest record of arson and social unrest, then perhaps their 3-day visit down to Los Angeles may not get approved. Noem isn't having any of that. The Department of Homeland Security is no longer run by Alejandro Mayorkas, who spent more time kissing himself in the mirror than he actually did working for the American people. Tricia McLaughlin, one of the undersecretaries, or the assistant secretaries, has also issued statements that they are not going to play around regarding the 500% increase on ICE assaults or assaults on Department of Homeland Security agents.
Oh, they want their 15 minutes of fame. That's exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing these ambitious Democrat politicians who want to get their 15 minutes of fame off of the backs of our ICE law enforcement officers. We, sadly, Maria, are seeing a 500% increase in assaults against our ICE enforcement operators. We're seeing Governor Walz, AOC, even Hakeem Jeffries likening our law enforcement to the Gestapo. It's disturbing. These are the men and women who are trying to protect us, trying to clean up America's streets. And the American people should know we are prioritizing the worst of the worst criminal legal aliens in this country. 75% of ICE arrests under the Trump administration have been of illegal immigrants who have prior convictions or pending criminal charges. So
now, the left-wing crews over in the halls of Congress and over on the legacy media side have been very, very careful about telling you who is in fact a part of the groups that the immigration custom enforcement raids are arresting. You've heard all kind of stories and tales about, they're going to the Home Depot because I was not a Latino at the Home Depot, like the one Democrat congressman regaled us. They tell you all of this kind of societal expectational nonsense about, everyone knows that, illegals hang out at the Home Depot to get work, and it's just a bunch of upstanding young gentlemen that are doing a wonderful job. How could they go there? And they forget to tell you that in one of the recent Los Angeles raids, the, in fact, core raid that Karen Bass has whined about at a Home Depot, that one of the individuals caught was guilty of multiple counts of child molestation. So, just saying, if people actually saw the crimes that those arrested were already convicted of or later indicted for, you wouldn't see even the legacy media outlets that you're currently seeing so confident and so cocky about going after ICE every single second of the day. And for the explicit clarity here, the State Department ain't playing around either. Because what we've got up for you is, again, one of the crazier things that I have seen. A State Department official who just openly admitted not only did he have his own personal convictions on alliances in the United States, which is a State Department official you're not allowed to do, but a bunch of them do because they're unelected bureaucrats, but he also said some rather choice things about what he would like to see done to Elon Musk, what he would like to see done to Israel and Iran and other United States allies and adversaries. And wouldn't you know, the James O'Keefe Media Group just got it on camera. We're going to get to that here in just a second. Don't go anywhere. Got to get the radio crew back. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
The Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Let's talk about Marco Rubio, the man wearing 15 hats and who has just about run out of all kinds of patience here. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, also the acting national security advisor, is really not a fan of those in the federal bureaucratic executive agencies who are unelected and, despite the wishes of the administration in power, though they are employees that in their contracts are serving at the express pleasure of the chief executive. That's why they are executive agencies. They're doing their own thing. And this is something that we've known. Back in the first Trump administration, you had individuals, many of them, inside all of these institutions, in the FBI and the Department of Justice really at large, in the State Department especially, and then in all of your ancillary organizations like the Food and Drug Administration and the entire Health and Human Services Department, as well as the Department of Education, the Department of Energy, the list goes on and on. And it turns out that those individuals who have been canned largely by President Trump, a lot of them at the finding of individuals like Elon Musk and the Doge team auditing the federal government. Some of those, how did Obama call them? Bitter clingers are left in the State Department. And the James O'Keefe Media Group caught one of these individuals saying some rather choice things that I don't think they were quite expecting were being recorded. Again, this is a member of the State Department on staff in the federal government.
How do you feel about him? I don't like.
I would love for him to be dragged out of the building with his hair plugs.
Yeah.
I would love that. And lynched on the street.
Yeah. How do you feel about him?
So again, that is an individual asking a State Department employee, how do you feel about him being Elon Musk? He says, I'd like him to be dragged out of the State Department by his hair plugs and lynched on the street. Now, the State Department did in fact respond to this. Here is the response from the State Department because he was fired. Oh, I'm sorry, I haven't mentioned at all what the guy's job was. Now, I can't air this, by the way. There's another clip of him saying F Israel, F Iran, F a bunch of other stuff regarding nations around the globe that, again, perhaps those who are of this individual's career should be saying, this individual, he was a visa specialist. This was one of the guys who decided who got a visa into the United States. Huh. How about that? So the State Department responded saying to his firing, because this guy was canned. Correct. This is just the beginning. These radicals with anti-American views have been embedded in our executive branch for generations, and we are systematically cleaning out contractors that have allowed this. Let us be clear. If you have these views and you work in or with the State Department, we will find you. Correct. That is absolutely, unequivocally, objectively correct for the State Department, for the FBI, for FEMA, for anyone. Remember that during the Biden administration or during the Obama administration before the first Trump administration, when there would be some type of a big, huge scandal like the IRS targeting Christian organizations and nonprofits, or during the Biden years, and you would have someone in FEMA who would tell their people, hey, if you're in an area affected by a natural disaster like a hurricane and you see a yard with a Trump sign in the yard, don't help them. Again, these were active policies carried out by individuals just like this in other administrations. And do you remember what would happen when, someone, for example, like James Comer's crew, before Comer was a lot more upset than he is now, when they would bring them before Congress and go, yeah, you can't have people in executive departments targeting Americans and calling them domestic terrorists and, targeting them with the IRS and not giving them federal aid that they have paid for. And what did they always say? Do you remember? We have completed an internal investigation and we have found we have done nothing wrong and we are working to ensure that all Americans are getting the care they deserve. And then the tape would replay. Yeah, it turns out this administration ain't playing around. And Marco Rubio is going through with pink slips, an axe, and a smile and removing all of the individuals who have been targeting Americans. And thank God, there's been a meme that has been going around over the last couple of months that is a poorly drawn blue ribbon that is pinned to the cartoon style. It's called a Wojak. And the individual has a MAGA hat on, and then there's a blue ribbon pinned on his chest, and the guy looks upset. And the award is called the I Fell For It Again Award. And it's usually posted whenever there is something that Republicans have hoped for from the Trump campaign that didn't pan out perhaps the way that they've wanted. For example, like how the Epstein files have been handled so far. Now, there is a counter to that is fantastic. And instead of the I Fell For It Again award, it is the I Got What I Voted For award. This is exactly what 99% of Americans are feeling when they see stuff like this. You got what you voted for. When you see federal bureaucrats who have targeted Americans consistently getting a firm, swift boot. They're very, very lucky, by the way, that so far it appears that the State Department, the Department of Justice, are so focused on clearing them out that they're not going straight for the indictments, which they absolutely should be. So that brings us on to President Trump, who is also not playing around anymore. So first of all, Trump, despite all of the conversations from the kind of horseshoe isolationists on the left, the Panisantos, and then of course on the right, the isolationists, who have been saying that, man, if Trump does anything regarding Iran and Israel, oh, we got a big, huge forever war. Oh, no. And all of this nonsense. Donald Trump's just not here for it. He's not going to be tut-tutted by all of these pro-Iran, pro-Hamas goofballs saying that America really needs to spend its time bowing down and apologizing to the individuals responsible for radical Islamic terror. And he's also not, at any point or time, going to simply snap his fingers and say, Netanyahu, stop with the bombing. That's not his point. Check it out.
Mr. President, the Iranian foreign minister this afternoon said if the U.S. is serious about negotiations, that you would call up Israel and request that they stop their airstrikes. Will you make that request?
Well, I think it's very hard to make that request right now. If somebody's winning, it's a little bit harder to do than if somebody's losing. But we're ready, willing, and able, and we've been speaking to Iran, and we'll see what happens.
Now, here's what's really funny about this. Trump gave Iran 60 days. He gave them 60 days. And he said, and not only did he say, he sent Steve Witkoff, who I've criticized, a lot of people have criticized. Now, personally, I can't stand Peter Navarro a lot more than Steve Witkoff. I understand for a lot of people it's flipped. But regarding the good old Witkoff crew, they went to Iran and they essentially tried to give Iran everything that they wanted with like a couple of asterisks. Yes, you can keep a nuclear program. You have to keep it under this level of enrichment for the uranium, and you have to allow unfettered access to inspectors, including from those in the United States, not just some European that you've paid off from Turkey. And Iran said, no, I cannot do that. I got to have all of the uranium in the way that I want it. Like Lego my ego, but with uranium. And it turned out that they pissed away those 60 days like it's tub thumping. And they, at the end of that 60 days, thinking that, oh, Trump's just going to taco. He's always going to chicken out. He's just going to leave it. Nothing's going to happen. On the 61st day, Netanyahu reminded the Iranian people why Americans don't have free healthcare. By which I mean the foreign aid-powered military of the Israeli Defense Force and the Israeli Air Force swung through the Middle East and promptly bent over the Ayatollah and spanked him repeatedly, like every child throwing a fit you've ever seen in Walmart. It was fantastic to see essentially the crew's boasting that we were going to have all of these issues. Trump is again giving them the out. He said, hey, come on to the table, let's try it out. You come out, we'll talk about it a little bit, but every time you say no, I might let him do it. I might do it, and nobody's quite aware. And the Iranians claimed, oh, well, have Israel stop bombing us, and we'll have a ceasefire, and then we'll negotiate. And Trump, who has heard this one before, said no. And so they have continued wiping the regime of Iran's nuclear program off of their boot like a bug. And now the Trump administration is considering a direct strike on the Fordo nuclear plant or a series of other things. There are all kinds of videos on the internet today telling you what they think the most likely outcomes are or whatever. I just realized I've gone over for the radio crew. Sorry about that. We'll catch you guys in a second. It's the Tony Kinnett cast. Sometimes you get a little bit into the conversation, you know. Now, there are a couple of important notes here about Trump no longer screwing around. There was an idea from a lot of the hyper-isolationists, the same who said that we were going to have World War III and that the BRICS alliance of Brazil and Russia and India, who is far more pro-USA, especially because of J.D. Vance, anyway, and South Africa, they were going to swoop in, we were going to have World War III and a big boots on the ground, a forever war. Oh, it was going to be just like Iraq and Afghanistan, because to hyper-isolationists, the only war they know is Iraq and Afghanistan. Just like those on the left, the only war they know is World War II. Whenever there's a foreign policy conversation that comes up with hyper-isolationists, not all isolationists in general, but those who are like kind of weird about it, the only war they know is Iraq and Afghanistan. That's it. And despite all of those promises, despite all of those... Sorry, I saw a comment that said that I really suck at impersonations and I didn't know Iranians spoke with a bad Indian accent. Look, Iranian's a very hard one, and stick around. I've got some more impersonations for you. As far as the hyper-isolationist crew, for example, like Tulsi Gabbard, the argument that she was going to talk Trump down and the isolationists were going to convince Trump to back off and negotiate again with Iran, and that Iran didn't even have a nuke program in the first place. In fact, Tulsi Gabbard had gone on this huge statement about how in this testimony that, actually, we didn't have any intelligence at all that Iran was building a nuclear weapon, which is not true. It's just not true. Here was the president on that today.
Do you have that Iran is building a nuclear weapon? Your intelligence community has said they have no evidence that they are at this point. Well, then my intelligence community is wrong. Who in the intelligence community said that? Your director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. She's wrong. Mr. President.
So Gabbard then came out on social media and essentially tried to do kind of a weird 180, but not a 180. And said, quote, "The dishonest media is intentionally taking my testimony out of context and spreading fake news as a way to manufacture division. America does have intelligence that Iran is at the point that it can produce a nuclear weapon within weeks to months if they decide to finalize the assembly. President Trump has been clear that this cannot happen, and I agree." Okay, when the left-wing libertarian is also agreeing with Trump on this, yeah, sorry. It does in fact appear that the administration who's not playing around is playing the same tune. And the idea that J.D. Vance and that Tulsi Gabbard were going to swoop in and we're going to stop Trump from doing what he has said he was going to do for 20 years. Again, not talking about bringing about regime change, not talking about boots on the ground. Last time I checked, Lindsey Graham's not the spokesperson for the administration, nor is Tom Tillis of North Carolina, neither of whom are very popular members in the Republican Party, even among traditional conservatives and establishment members. I'm just not seeing the really silly nonsense. Again, the prediction here that we're going to have this big, huge boots on the ground war. And by the way, Trump's not only going after the isolationists, he's going after the interventionists too. Check it out.
You've been making progress towards a peace deal, but I don't know if you know this, but Lindsey Graham and Mike Pompeo were there on the ground in Ukraine, seemingly doing the opposite, trying to provoke the Ukrainians to keep fighting. What do you think of that?
Well, we're going to see, and people have to be very careful with what they say. They got to be very careful with their mouth. Because
That's true. That is true. I do hate to tell you that senators do not, in fact, have free reign, if the president doesn't want them to travel around the world and cause significant trouble. No. The Trump administration is doing his own thing. He's not playing to an ideological perspective. Got to bring the radio crew back. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast. I freaking love Return to the Mac. It's a very Return to the Mac kind of day because, of all things, Pakistan, as in the nation of Pakistan, has recommended President Donald Trump for the 2026 Nobel Peace Prize. That ain't a joke. I'm sorry. I'm just one more time for the boys and girls at home. The government of Pakistan recommends President Donald J. Trump for the 2026 Nobel Peace Prize for recognition of his decisive diplomatic intervention and pivotal leadership during the recent India-Pakistan crisis. So, remember the terror attacks that came from groups within Pakistan into India. India responded. The two nuclear powers, not exactly stable, started getting more warlike, both mobilized the full military. There was even the talk of perhaps a certain kind of radioactive green kind of warhead. It's actually black, but don't worry about it. Being attached to rockets. The Trump administration stepped in and said, no, down, like a parent with a bad dog, when like the water bottle. No. You want to be broke? You want to be destitute? Your entire economies in Pakistan and India depend on the United States. And Trump said, if you want to be broke and dead, no money for the funeral, then by all means continue. Otherwise, stop it. And it did, in fact, stop that war. Trump single-handedly stopped the India-Pakistani war. Additionally, Trump announced at 5:58 Eastern today, along with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, a wonderful treaty between the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the Republic of Rwanda have signed a peace treaty. He's having representatives from Rwanda and Congo in Washington on Monday to sign the official documents. So that's 2 wars in a couple of months that Trump has in fact brokered peace of. Now, a lot of the critics of the President Trump administration have pointed out that Trump has not in fact brokered peace between Ukraine and Russia like he said he was going to. I am going to submit this slight caveat. Number one, that the Trump administration, who is currently without any loss of American life so far, without any direct U.S. offensive involvement, is removing the Iranian nuclear threat from the entire region that funds massive terror regimes all over the Middle East and in Southeast Asia. That this terror regime being removed with very little involvement from the United States is being done because of President Trump's diplomatic decisions. That this war in Africa is in fact on hiatus, pending treaty signing, because President Trump negotiated a peace. That the war between India and Pakistan was negotiated because of peace. I'm just going to say that if Barack Obama could stutter his way to getting a Nobel Peace Prize for nothing, then President Trump, I'm going to be real with you, he definitely deserves a Nobel Peace Prize here. Now, Trump does point out that they only give Nobel Peace Prizes to liberals, which is very true. So I'm sure that this year the Nobel Peace Prize will go to Greta Thunberg for being thrown out of Israel and coach. But, you know, those things all said, I do have a couple of really great quick news reactions for you guys this evening. They're some of the best ones that we've had in a very long time. Again, when I was talking in the last segment about those who are taking the Israel-Iran war as a means to act, what's the right word here, mentally insane, I'm not joking.
Don't nuke Iran! Don't nuke Iran! Don't nuke Iran! Don't nuke Iran! Don't nuke Iran!
Why, yes, radio audience, that is an accordion.
Right now,
oh, he stopped.
Across this country,
man, I was
media waves across this.
Okay, I'm sorry, I can't take any more of discount Colin Kaepernick. I gotta say, you know that it's a good protest when someone breaks out an accordion, the national instrument of Iran. I mean, come on. You know, when the first call to prayer, sounds out, that morning from the mosque, it's some guy getting up there and doing the oompa oompa. Oh, people have lost it. It's wonderful. I mean, then you have people that are just calling for Trump to be eliminated entirely over the Iranian Israeli war, which is a more Secret Service kind of take.
Hey, MAGA, Trump supporters, and the rest of the United States citizens, I need you to understand how dangerous Donald Trump is and why he needs to be eliminated. Okay, I usually have a pretty good rule that I don't trust sweaty men in tank tops making videos of themselves. That's just, let's call that just a standard rule for life. But if you are a sweaty dude, in a colored wife beater, and you have decided to spread with us your worldly wisdom, I don't think I'm going to take that opportunity to put down my book of Thomas Sowell so that I can listen to you tell me why you're not using deodorant.
Plus additional benefits.
They said he has
they got the commercials on in the background, plus additional benefits.
2 weeks before he decides what he's going to do with Iran. Now, for you MAGA and Trump supporters who love to use veterans and the military as steroids to amplify your patriotism.
As steroids to amplify your patriotism. Gosh, you know when you just love this country and then therefore you have a sense of gratitude towards those who have sacrificed for this country, that I guess that's just a cheap steroid? Bold move.
You have 2 weeks to do something about Donald Trump. If not, the chain of events will go as follows.
Here we go. Every time, I swear, whether it's the isolationist on the left or the right, they get out their prediction box. We get to hear from Madam Goofy and the excellent wisdom of the crystal ball.
Donald Trump and unqualified Pete Hegseth is going to give the orders to strike Iran. And the moment that happens, you MAGA and you Trump supporters who are thinking that, ooh, something's going to happen in America, World War III. No, what's going to initially happen is the 40 to 50,000 soldiers that are stationed around the Persian Gulf are going to be fucking killed.
Oh. Okay.
Now, as of to date, the 40 to 50,000 soldiers that are scattered around the Persian Gulf aren't fucking with.
All right, that's enough of you. Okay, so despite his very colorful vocabulary, I love the prediction matrix. By the way, 93 WIBC board op. Sorry about that. My bad, dude. I don't like to make you flirt with the FCC's cursing rules. I apologize about that. I will say very, very quickly here to all of you out there, I would love to know what fundamental power you believe Iran has to instantly kill all of the American troops in the Persian Gulf region. Like, does Cthulhu live in the Red Sea? And I mean, there's a Call of Duty video game like monologue that the evil general talks about where he lost 40 to 50,000 troops in the blink of an eye due to a nuke. But Iran not having the nuke is kind of the whole point here. So I really do love the goofy nonsense that has made it into this conversation. Now, there are things that others are worried about in this country. I don't mean to just, point out those who have lost it a little bit on the social media side of things. The Democrats in power are also very worried about things. Representative Maxwell Frost, who is known as being the golden child of Bernie Sanders. He's a very great young man. I went on stage with him in Coachella while I was looking at AOC, and I was excited to announce this is Maxwell Frost. And he's very, very worried about something, and he needs to share it with you.
Hey, these mass deportations are going to help out.
Oh, wait a minute. That's not the right one. Give me Maxwell Frost and his stupid goofiness. Sorry, radio crew. You guys don't get to hear him. We can't pull that clip up right now. So, radio crew, you guys head over to commercial. We'll see you soon. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Well, don't worry, folks. I do have Jasmine Crockett, who has decided that this is also the best time to go after Americans that she disagrees with in her skinned Big Bird suit. For apparently, half of the country's got a mental illness or something.
This idea that we don't care how many people get hurt, we don't care how we prostitute our service members, thinking that you have your own special little army that's for you. I mean, it is sick. It is really sick. And anybody that supports it is also sick. And so, we've got a mental health crisis in this country because everyone, no matter how you affiliate yourself, should be against Trump, period. This is not partisan for me. Like, I would give anything to have, sad to say, George Bush. Give me any regular Republican nowadays and I would be happy. But right now we have someone who does not care, and he is being enabled by the fact that there are, people that follow him and they pump him up.
Okay, I gotta point this one out because as much as I enjoy, as someone accurately described, the fuzzy banana peel giving us great words of wisdom. She does realize that Republican and Democrat previous presidents deported a lot of illegal immigrants, not in perhaps the same way, but there were a lot of deportations she's not mentioning. Other than that, what's the big problem with Trump? The dude got more individuals that she claims to care about to vote for him than many other groups. He's, in fact, a lot more economically liberal and protectionist, closer to Bill Clinton in a lot of trade policies than he is to, say, George Bush or Mitt Romney or Paul Ryan. So, I'm not really sure how you think that's going to work out for you. Obviously, the calling half the country mentally ill, that never really works. We do have Representative Maxwell Frost of Florida now. This is special.
You know, this fight against far-right neo-fascism, for me at least, was mainly taking stage in my home in Florida, fighting against Ron DeSantis and the extremism there. And something I always told people is that Project 2025 is actually Florida 2022. Florida 2020. And the stuff that's going on around the country right now, we've actually been dealing with in the South for a long time, especially in my state of Florida. So the difference is, it's like the struggle in my state has kind of been just spread throughout the nation. And honestly, that day after Election Day, I had a hard time getting up, probably like a lot of.
He's worried that America is going to turn into Florida. Now, I happen to have sitting here Project 2025. This is actually it. This is the Project 2025, the mandate for leadership. I've read through it. I'm one of the few very poor, sad, sorry souls in this country that has read this thing cover to cover. And it's not easy. It's not like a book, like a novel. It is essentially a combination, a menu of policy ideas that don't all agree with each other, by the way. I mean, there are like some pick and choose your own adventure kind of stuff in here. And a lot of these pages include sources on things. Not a single section of this entire Project 2025, which again is just a, hey, you're a conservative president. These are some cool things you could do in case you don't have all of them memorized in your head. That's all 2025 was. So I've read this thing. Nowhere in there does it say America should be Florida. However, may I just say, promise, like the plan is to make America Florida, one of the most popular states to live in the country, with one of the most popular governors in the country, with a state whose biggest problem is which state representatives, are not conservative enough. We got to bring people back for a commercial. It's the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal. Mail time. Mail time. Mail time.
On the Tony Kinnett cast.
All right, we do have a couple of phenomenal questions brought in this week and some that are just terrible. So I'm not sure, Producer Nick, which one do you really want me to go through first? Wait, are you telling me that Jasmine Crockett was wearing a separate yellow outfit?
The same shoulder pad.
No way. I'm sorry. We're gonna have to put mail time on hold for just a second. I have to confirm this. Jasmine Crockett is wearing it. She has multiple Cruella de Vil, but with Big Bird suits.
This idea that we don't care how many people get hurt. We don't care.
There's that yellow. It's horrible. That one looks kind of like a grandmother's Afghan that is crossed with a dying duck. I'm a little shocked. Okay, here's Crockett on The View. Let's see if it's the same thing. I got to see it in person.
Well, over the weekend, we actually saw.
Oh my good sweet grace.
Over the weekend, we actually saw a tragic and brazen act of political violence. Lawmaker and his wife were political climate.
No way. They're this. Oh my goodness. That has to be a saturation thing. That has to be. No, the seams are different. Yep. That woman bought 2 different canary yellow abomination suits and wore them back to back. Is someone going to tell her yellow is not her color? No one's told her that public speaking isn't her strong suit. And yet here we are. Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, that was absolutely worth it. Good, sweet grace. Okay, moving on. Beth, were the earthquakes in Tehran really earthquakes, or was it something else? Okay, so today there was a notification that a 5.0 5, I think, on the Richter scale, earthquake was detected. The epicenter, like 30 miles north of Tehran. And so there was a couple of questions that came up. Oh, is this Iran testing, for example, nuclear explosions, nukes underground? Because you can, in fact, set off the Richter scale by testing a nuke underground. However, I don't think that's what this was for 2 reasons. Number one, because Iran has a lot of tectonic activity. They do. Iran experiences earthquakes pretty often. Number 2, you don't see this kind of a size. I mean, you'd have to be what do we say? Like the Tsar Bomba, the biggest Soviet nuke ever, would probably get you to about 4.5 to 5 on the Richter scale. I mean, we don't have the ability as humans, I'm sorry, to put up like a 5 or a 6 on the Richter scale. We do not. That would be cool. Really, the closest that we ever got to that level on the Richter scale is when J.B. Pritzker jumped out of bed a little too quickly. That was the closest man-made earthquake we'd ever had. And then number 3, there's no known Iranian facility near the epicenter of that earthquake. And Iranians are not exactly quiet at digging and building, which is why the IDF knows where everything is. So exactly. So that's my take on that. Now, could I be wrong? Absolutely. I'm not a meteorologist, not a palm reader. So that's just my take at the moment. Looks like one of the natural earthquakes, but that timing. All right, this next one is from Flameout12345. Who are the primary Democrat strategists? So there was a time in this country when it was like Donna Brazile, and then Donna Brazile started sniffing her own farts. And so after losing a lot of elections and putting forward people who are really awful, Donna Brazile gets invited on the weekend shows every once in a while, like for fun, but that's really it. James Carville, because he was a key success in helping Bill Clinton win, and Bill Clinton is the last Democrat president who inspired union workers in the Midwest especially, they've been trying to recapture that magic ever since. And so despite James Carville coming out in front of the country and, though very stupidly, telling people they got to stop with all of the nonsense with the LGBTQ plus 2IA stuff and the racial stuff, they go to him sometimes, but he eventually toes the party line. There's a newer class of strategists who are young and media savvy, but it's not really clear to me how much they listen to them at this point. So to the answer, who are the primary Democrat strategists right now? They really don't have any. They don't, because none of the younger progressives want to listen to Nancy Pelosi. And then none of the older progressives want to listen to David Hogg, understandably so. So then who do you have? You have TikTok. You have whenever AOC gets out there and speaks, and then Bernie Sanders gets out there and tweets as well, and that's like close enough. This is why Obama has to come out every couple of months and tell everyone to like behave, even though that doesn't work either, because he then turns a conversation about behaving into lecturing black men. So really nobody. This one is from Green Mama 54. She says, "Are you fair and balanced or not?" No, I'm not. I've never once claimed to be an independent, unbiased reporter. I am actually known for, if anyone ever accidentally calls me an investigative reporter, I say, no, I am not a reporter. I don't. I have a very biased point of view. I believe really that everyone has a biased point of view. And so instead, for me to maintain trust with you, the audience, what I try to do is say, here's what happened. Here's my take. Because if I'm very open and honest with you about me being a conservative, I know, shocker, then you'll be able to tell when my opinion kicks in. And by the way, if you don't like that, there's a ton of other shows where white dudes in beards and glasses tell you the day's news. So yeah, I'm not fair and balanced. Now, I don't try to make excuses when the right does stupid things. For example, I am one of the first guys whenever there is someone on the right that commits a horrible crime like a shooting or some type of sexual crime to say, and I quote, hang him in the public square after conviction. So as far as, you know, the being fair part is, that's where I try to be fair. And I've invited a lot of Democrats on the show. A lot of them don't take me up on it because I do, you know, I don't promise to just, you know, give them a warm hug and a handshake and a kiss. So that said, from Timothy Kincannon, Why do so many politicians tell blatant lies? Why is this tolerated and almost commonly expected? I recommend a new segment for your show called Liar of the Week. Not a bad idea. We'll work on that. The short answer is, why do politicians tell blatant lies and why is it tolerated? Because the American people are apathetic. We finished the Cold War, we won, and Americans decided that it was easier now to live off the fats of that victory, the fruits of that struggle, and that someone else would take care of it. If you were on the right, Newt Gingrich would take care of it, and if you were on the left, Bonnie Frank would take care of it. And it turned out, no, that was a very bad idea. There was a time in this nation's history when your dad or your grandfather or you got home from work at the end of every Friday and you checked the oil in the car. You opened the hood, you pulled out the dipstick, you checked the level of the oil. And there was a reason that you did that. Radio crew will catch you very, very soon, that being on Monday. Have a wonderful weekend. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. We'll continue over on the live stream. Now, to finish that particular analogy, American people got really used to having the oil light. They never really checked the oil. Essentially, they would just wait for the oil light to come on and then they would take the car to get it serviced. The problem is that in the 2010s, the light broke. And when the light broke, Americans really didn't know, because they didn't care, if there was any problem under the hood. And so right around 2020 and COVID, Americans noticed that there was a weird, funky sound coming from the engine. They walked out of the car, colloquially, lifted up the hood, and smoke poured out of the engine block. And so Americans are in a new era of starting to care about politics again, because you have to. Additionally, the legacy media crapped itself in front of the entire country multiple times and said, you don't smell anything, I don't smell anything, no one pooped, like a toddler trying to tell you they didn't just go to the bathroom in their pants. And the American public smelled it and said, ew, and then changed. And now that's why there's a lot of new media sources. So from Steph, why don't you do a Jasmine Crockett impression? Okay, so normally, despite it being very off this evening, normally I'm comfortable in a couple of impersonations. I used to do a little bit of voice acting. Some of my favorite voices are around kind of my vocal range. My favorite impression to do is Gopher from Winnie the Pooh. Summer squash and honey. I really enjoy doing voices. Jasmine Crockett, though, there's a little bit of a flag that comes up. It's usually considered bad taste if you are not a black person to do what you consider to be an inner city black accent. Now, Jasmine Crockett's is fake. We have lots of footage of her when she's young, talking in kind of like a standard Midwestern accent that she got growing up in St. Louis. But now she's essentially combined what she imagines Tupac mixed with the movie Friday to sound like. And it's really funny. I mean, we've watched her on air this evening. And I can make fun of that, but I don't know. It's really low-hanging fruit. And because her accent is really fake, I don't usually jump into it. It honestly changes a little bit too much for me to pin it down on something. There's a difference between trying to imitate Medea and, trying to imitate a person who is actually from an inner city in the United States who speaks with that particular accent. Excuse me. This last question we'll do tonight. This is from Dana Hodgen. Why are Democrats fighting for illegal immigrants, gang members, pro-Hamas, and Palestinians? Is it because they are working for the left? Do they want their employees back? What's the only thing that makes sense? The reason that I believe the left is currently fighting as hard as possible for illegals over on the immigration side of things, or are fighting so hard for the LGBTQ plus 2IA 8675 Jenny group, or are fighting so hard for the pro-Hamas and Palestinian group, I've heard it called the Omni Cause, and there really are younger members of the Democrat Party which do believe that in society the only thing that matters is whether you are historically of the haves or the have-nots. And therefore, if you are from groups historically that are the haves, and they look around society and they go, look at all of these white Christian men that are straight. Therefore, they are the problem. They are the ills of this world. And anyone associated with them, they're terrible. And those are the people who are the haves. And then the have-nots are the oppressed. Everyone who has been oppressed by the white man. Ooh. And it turns out that when you start looking at the situation, It's not actually because the white man that other groups in certain areas have disparities. This is a thing that bothered me to death when I worked at Indianapolis Public Schools, because we would go into, as the science director, I would sit down with the rest of the STEM department, so the math coaches and directors, and we would sit there and talk about why different groups weren't doing as well. And it would always come up, well, you know, there's this gap between our white students and our brown students, because they couldn't say Hispanics, as though we had like a big thriving Indian population in Indianapolis. But the brown students, and then from the brown students to the black students. Like a Sherwin-Williams paint strip from hell. And they would suggest that the reason that they were struggling is because, these kids didn't have any resources and it was just a racial issue and inherent systemic racial stuff. No. It turns out that the real secret to whether or not a student is going to succeed is the number of parents in the home. That's it. That is it. It has generational qualities to it. But if you take a kid from a single parent home in the Allegheny Mountains or the Appalachians, and you sit him next to a kid from inner city Chicago or Atlanta and have them take the test, they will likely score the exact same. That is called a greater denominator. We look at that actually makes more sense, because if you take 5 black students, 5 white students, and 5 brown students and sit them in the room and have them take a test, you're not going to get a surefire every time all of the white students are going to do good, all the black students are going to do poorly, all the brown kids are going to do mediocre. No. The reason the left is actually fighting for this, I think a lot of the youths believe it, a lot of the old ones don't, is that they've thrown their lot in. They made their bed. They have built an entire 20-year campaign cycle and coalition, this Obama coalition of the oppressed. And they have had to come up with all of these wild, bizarre reasons as to why a single black mother from Chicago should be marching right next to the transgender activist from Palo Alto, who should be marching right next to the pro-Hamas activist from Dearborn. And it isn't working, but it's too late. And so this is why when you have Cory Booker or Chuck Schumer or whomever, they get on camera, they look really uncomfortable trying to defend why they think that guys should be allowed in girls' sports. They don't really have a good argument for it. You don't even really see them get passionate. They just go, Republicans are hateful. It's not happening, and it's good that it is. They have to. They have no one left. The only remaining demographic in the United States that truly, truly believes in the Democrats are suburban white women with a college degree. And of those, most of those are single. In the United States, in the millennial and the millennial to Gen X, white women who are most often from the suburbs, I usually call them wine moms, who have little family, that is typically the biggest demographic group in support of the Democrats. They are very, very passionate about it. Now, that's already splintering too, because it turns out a fraction of those are leaving to join their Republican counterparts with like thriving, happy, healthy families, because they were promised all of these pro-women rights, and now the trans issue has come along and stepped on women's rights, putting some nasty, perverted male wrestler in a locker room with a bunch of 15-year-old girls. All right, well, I'm not going to drag it on anyway, So you guys have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you on Monday. Take care, stay safe, and touch some grass and spend some time with your families. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Take care.